Welcome back to part 11 of my FXS Lowrider Restoration Series 80 Shovelhead with this 4-speed transmission. If you haven't seen the last video, click right here. A link will take you to it. If you're first joining us now, hit that subscribe button below and the bell to get new videos as they come out in this series. There are going to be more to come. I'll provide a link up here, take you to the first video in this series. We go down the rabbit's hole in this. In our last video, we did the complete disassembly of this transmission. As you see, this is where we left off. There's some items that need to be pressed out of the transmission. Of course, it's going to be cleaned up. We have some of the main components here, laying out here, that need further disassembly that I'm considering to be separate units, such as the starter cover, the shifting mechanism on the top. This main shaft, pretty much all I need from the main shaft is this gear here. That's it. All the rest of this is pretty much garbage, though I'm going to be miking out this for the form, providing some measurements as part of an ongoing discussion of the condition of this particular shaft. That's all that shaft is going to be for. Fourth gear is going to be replaced. I'm going to be sending out my fourth gear for some custom work that's going to make this a leak-free transmission. I hope, of course, but we have somebody in the community who does some special work on these gears and get a new gear from Andrews and have it specially machined in Canada for that application. So while these events are ongoing, things are being mailed out, taking these pieces down adjacent to press stuff out, have new seals and bushings and what have you pressed in. We're going to be doing all different sorts of things as we bring this transmission back together. So let's get started. I'm going to jump to the kicker cover here. First observation, this particular nut, in accordance with the manual, is supposed to be 30 to 40 pounds, and this is it as removed. This is zero, it is nothing. The only thing stopping this from falling off is the lock washer here. So I have to make sure that there was no damage due to this excessive looseness. I'm going to disassemble this anyway because everything has to be cleaned. So when I disassemble it, we're going to make sure it's not excessive end play. This could be simply reassembled if everything's fine, and all I need to do is order a new lock washer. No socket required. This is terrible. There we go, completely disassembled. We'll now clean it and do an inspection. Having cleaned up the old cover, I noticed that the inner bushing was falling right out. Just from the bending of the kicker shaft over the years, hitting the thing. It was loose fitting in here. It was no good. That and the fact that it was a cosmetic dumpster fire, I opted to just buy a new one. I wasn't going to be bothered with it. It's not that expensive. Only thing that I really had to do was transfer this piece right here. This is the retainer for the spring. So I'm going to put that on right now, right quick. And this is off and on with a 7/16. Now we'll start the actual assembly. I'll be using a little bit of 80/90 during this assembly. That portion's done. Now we'll do the kicker shaft. During assembly, it was noticed that this shaft here was bent. It was also noticed that these teeth right here were chewed up. We could see it from this angle as well as this side profile. Also, given that these pieces needed to be replaced, I'd opted to get the entire rebuild kit from Sifton to go into the side cover. The first thing I'm going to do is turn the shaft here so that this flat is pointed towards my left, just like this. You can see the flat, set that up. So now I'm going to place this gear down, and you can see I'm going to turn this to the 7 o'clock, and that's going to move this up a little. So it's going to point upward a bit. That's going to be the right location like that. Turn it around just for look, see where the spring sits, just like that. The way the book describes it is kind of foolish, because it'll say the flat will be pointed like this and this will be pointed like this, but there's absolutely no way to get both of them aligned in that position. Get our lock washer. Should you need an extra one of those, and you will because they're not reusable. I'm going to temporarily attach this pedal for leverage. One of the problems I immediately ran into upon assembly when installing all of these pieces is how far the end of this shaft is proud of the end of this lip when assembling everything together. If it's not far enough, when the nut is secured at the end of the shaft, it will bind and the kicker won't move. If it is too far proud, you're going to have end play, which is also not good. The thing that had escaped me initially was how far off this stuff is and how I was going to go about solving it. Do you solve it by adjusting the bushing, or do you solve it by adjusting the end here, which seemed to be a little bit off? Now, I was corrected by folks on the Shovelhead forum, and thankfully so, that this right here is pretty much the most important factor. The distance between the flat over here and here is what's going to set up the gear to the other gear on the transmission itself, so that has to be maintained. Ultimately, what we're going to need to do is set up the distance here by changing the size of this bushing or washer, which seats down along this shaft to push this out to the exact height to accomplish both of those tasks, which is the exact amount to stop it from binding but not allow for end play. This micrometer says 118.5. I ideally am looking for no more than, a couple thousandths of an inch end play if I can avoid any more than that on the shaft in and out like that. So I really want to just shave off a couple thousandths of an inch at a time off of this and then reassemble the device and check for binding. That's what we're going to do. The bevel is itself a blessing, as we could see in here, because it allows me to exert a downward force onto this washer without coming through the bottom, right? And I'm definitely not taking out that much material. So I could put it on here, have the appropriate safety goggles and what have you, and push down, so I'm able to hold this in place during that time. I don't know how much is going to be taken off, so I'm just going to run it for a couple of seconds, see what we get. I'm going to remeasure it, and then I'm going to know how many seconds removes how many thousandths of an inch of material. You could best believe that's hot. New measurement is showing about 115, took off about 3 thousandths, in some places 114. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna assemble, and I'm just gonna tighten softly with a ratchet and see if there's any binding. I can already feel binding. I give it a little turn, but there's no sense of continuing. I'm gonna have to take off more, substantially more from this. And I'm not gonna keep repeating this. I'm gonna come back when we're getting to a point where it's getting close. I'm down to 99 thousandths of an inch on that washer, and it's at the point where just a light torquing by hand, giving it just a nice nudge, is such that it's not binding and there's no end play. So this is a good candidate for trying to bring more torque upon it and make sure that it's still not binding. If at any point it binds, it immediately comes apart, and I continue to shave off another couple thousandths, although it's going to be in much smaller increments, maybe 10 seconds on the belt sander at this point to shave off 1 or 2. But I'm going to try torquing it down. That was off camera, but it is at the full 35 foot-pounds, and there is no drag. Everything is nice and loose. And we can see that I have a good enough buffer. I'm spinning that washer because there is room there. You can see that little bit of deflection. And I did measure it with the feeler gauges, and 5 passes through. As you can see right there, there's 5 thousandths and 6 does not. So this is set up nice now. Doesn't wiggle back and forth and rock like the old one did with slop everywhere, and at the same time doesn't bind, with enough room to adjust for expansion, you know, due to temperature changes and what have you. This is done. Our next item of business is going to be this shift cover shift mechanism. This is I believe 79.5 and newer. We can see right now that mine is in the neutral position because the neutral nub is depressing the neutral switch. In order to disassemble this, there is in fact a non-reusable plug that needs to be drilled out and pulled from the top of this unit to gain access to separate the rotor from here. Seems rather unfortunate that this is the design, but such as it is, we're going to have to do this. So when you do something like this, be prepared to have to order a replacement plug before you commit yourself to this activity. And I'll be kicking off this activity with a center punch for the drill bit. I'll be hitting this with a pilot first. Of all my tools, I found the needle nose vice grips to be the best way. A hole big enough to get the vice grips in, with enough to be able to bite down, and then pry in a couple directions just to loosen it up and then pull up. So once you get the hole big enough to be able to get under there and bite it, that's where you want to be. If we look down here, we can see a C-clip that retains this system from the top, and that clip will be removed, and this whole shaft and unit should push out from the bottom. There we go. Pushes through. We saw that happen. There's also a washer there. Nice. Covered in this metal substance. Yeah, there would have been no way to clean this. And some other pieces here I'll have to sort through. So we disassemble this. The spring. I'm going to be removing these shifting pawls next by way of these circlips. So I'm just going to take a flathead screwdriver and push these out. There's one. There's two. Before I pull the pawls out, I realized that I can't pull out this entire piece because there's interference here with the shifter. So I'm going to pull the shifter mechanism out right quick by removing these 2 bolts. This screw is still in here because it's an interference fit, so I'm going to keep this off to the side because this screw is going to go back in before this is reassembled. I'm going to do that now. This is 7/16. Sort everything out. I've got everything sorted on the table now. I'm going to start from the top. This piece right here, now disconnected from the unit, there's no tension on it. I'm going to remove this nut, washer, allow me to pull this through gently. There looks like a port here for oil, for lubrication perhaps, but it's still going to need to be cleaned to remove all of the old oil and metal powder and residue and whatnot. I'm going to hit this one first, get this cleaned up. Oil seal over here, one of the types of oil seals, got a metal ring that holds it in. If there's a replacement oil seal in the rebuild kit, I'll pop this out and put a new one in. Other than that, I'm not going to worry about it because I can just jump back and do it as I'm doing the rebuild portion. Right now we're just cleaning. Judging by previous dressings, I have the sneaking suspicion that this has leaked before. And here, doesn't matter. You scrape this gasket off. This is all going to be replaced anyway. These pieces are now completed. Again, when this seal arrives from the new kit, and if it doesn't, I'll order it separately. I'll press in the new seal. As for now, this piece will get a light oiling of transmission fluid. Everything will be reassembled. Interesting how much was clogged up in here. I'm going to be checking all of these passages throughout the transmission. Make sure this seal has enough oil in it. I've already cleaned the washer and nut. Just place them back on temporarily. Hold everything together so we can move this part to the clean section. There we go, done. I'm going to be further breaking this down. I'm going to be removing the springs very gently, just like that, from both sides. And that's only so proper cleaning can be done, for no other reason. Okay. I also should be removing the neutral switch too. Neutral's going to be 5/8 deep well. You're going to have to clean that separately. Contaminated too. There's a nylon bushing in there. I'm just going to wash this with the bushing in there. There's no need to push that out. That's just fine. So if I feel I could clean this satisfactorily, decontaminate it with these remaining components in here, I'm not going to go any further. I'll just start the process. And if I feel I can't get under there, then I'm going to remove these too. As for now, we're going to start cleaning this. This is all sludge and metal I'm pulling out of the recesses here. It's disgusting. It's terrible. This is just the pre-cleaning before the cleaning. They do with the paper towel and what have you. I like to see what's what. This preparation also includes gasket removal over here and on the front here as well. I'm going to degrease this now. That bad boy looks brand new inside, like it's 1979. Everything has been sufficiently decontaminated, as we see. I want to get some oil on the metal parts right quick. I don't want them to flash rust. Metal parts have now been oiled, including a little bit on this right here. This is the one that gets grease from a grease gun outside the transmission. It's very nice. Clean up the springs, put those back in now. If the spring's been cleaned, I'll pre-oil them before they go in. It'll be a lot easier. There's one spring in. There's the second spring. It's done. Very nice. I realized as I put in the second spring that the springs may be tapered on one side that allows it to lock in here. The first spring was hanging over a bit, and now that I've flipped it over, we can see that on the stop here, it doesn't come over the ledge like this one. So we now have a nice even space for those springs. I'm going to start by knocking out this oil seal so I could get the spacer out. There's no problem at all. This is the oil seal. The spring is intact. The seal itself didn't look too bad. I'm not going to reuse these, obviously. I just wanted to point out that there was no damage to this seal. I'm going to pull the spacer from here. The spacer itself has some wear on the inside. I won't reuse this either. And there's a lot of RTV that was used to suppress the leakage in vain. When you look at the bearings on this particular one, it's a little noisy. There's some chatter. They themselves feel smooth. We'll remember from previous videos, there's so much metal in this transmission that it's circulated through here mile after mile, like really fine sandpaper grinding everything down. The bearings are suspect too, and that's why I'm pulling everything from this transmission. All the bearings are being ripped out, and top quality bearings are going to be put back in. This is no exception, and now I'm able to press this bearing out. When I see this particular wear inside here, I wonder if something was too far in or misaligned or something was caught in between here that caused this. I know the bearing's supposed to be recessed a certain amount and everything's supposed to sit a certain way, but I'm not entirely sure. I'm going to be going by the book on reassembly. With that out of the way, it's late enough, the shop's open, it's time for road trip. Road trip. Heading to Jason's.
And we are here live from the Jason's Bug Ranch Coliseum in Winter Garden, Florida. It is Sunday.
I'm eating. Leave me alone.
Oh, sorry. Gonna be retrofitting some draw covers right quick with an old Audi pipe.
There we go. This should hold. I'll try it out and make sure everything's working okay. I'm going to be locking the shaft into the vise now. I'm going to be doing it on these splines here. I feel that's okay since we're using the rubber hose here. It's going to be the widest part of the shaft. Make sure everything stays centered. And there we go, we're locked in. Gonna knock that locking tab straight right quick. You probably noticed by now that even though I'm not reusing this main shaft, the procedures that I'm using are such that I'm treating it like I'm reusing it. I don't have the exact socket size here. I'm going to post it above. We're going to loosen this nut now. Here we go. Make sure the jaws of the vise are tight. I'm going to give it a shot with pneumatic as it keeps slipping with the breaker bar. See how this goes. Little light taps. There we go. Took it right off. It got the job done. Very good. So we're finished with the vise. So I'm at the small press area of the shop. I'm just getting things set up now for the shaft. We'll be putting the shaft on. We'll be pressing out that gear. Remove that nut and lock washer. I have a piece of scrap aluminum that I'm going to be using to buffer the press from the top of the shaft. Even though I'm not reusing the shaft, I stated that I'm going to be removing this as if I was. There's the shaft. So I have the gear removed, and this is the only thing I was looking to retain. We'll clean that up. We're gonna do an inspection, obviously, of the hardened metal surfaces of the gear. We're not getting into that right now.
Is the bearing okay?
I'm gonna take a look at the bearing right now. If the race is okay and appears to be okay and whatever, reuse it. If not, get rid of it. They're not expensive, so I'm not really losing sleep over it. The bearing itself, I'm gonna post this as I found it. It has 2 dents into it. I don't know what, I've never seen that before. If this is original or whatnot. Did somebody install this? See those dents in the bearing? I don't know what to make of that. Doesn't seem to affect the bearing itself, but yeah, a little creepy. It makes a noise when it spins, but again, we had that contamination of basically sandpaper in this whole unit, so it's not gonna be reused.
Yeah.
That's it. And of course, this shaft, which again is not going to be reused. It was only taken apart so that it can be mic'd out for the folks on the forum, get everybody a reading of what this is showing, and I don't know, welded into a sculpture of some kind. We'll be ordering the new one from Andrews. We're done with this. We're going to be moving on to the next step, and that's pressing out this bearing in the transmission. Is going to be pressed out from the inside outward. I have to set up the press so that we could exert pressure over here and push it down. I didn't feel comfortable pushing this bearing out from the inside because I didn't know of a very good way other than these 2 flat spots to push this against the press on the bottom. And it's this ledge that bothered me. I didn't know how much pressure this could take, if it would break or if it would weaken. So I've been working with Jason, pulled out this kit. It's a front wheel drive service tool with some other parts from another kit, only to size it up for Imperial, because this is a metric shop. And I'll show you what we got. I'll disassemble this so we can see. This is what we have on the inside. This is sized to actually grab onto the bearing so that the bearing could be pulled up through into this cylinder right here, this metal cylinder. As we take a look in here, obviously a threaded rod, and this is big enough to seat over this so that it could be collected. And in doing so, I don't have to put this on a press. Now when it's pressed in, it's not a problem because you could distribute the weight across the entire bottom of the transmission. I feel comfortable doing the pressing in. I don't feel comfortable doing the pressing out. So let's get this set up now. So I'm going to place this in here. It's important to make sure this is perfectly centered. I'm going to raise it up just to get this in the transmission and lower it back down. Get a couple turns on this just to hold everything together. So I've tightened it down and I've inspected to ensure that it's centered and on the bearing, not overlapping onto any of the transmission metal. Start our tightening procedure to pull the bearing out through the front. I'm gonna do a quick inspection, make sure everything is going okay. I don't mind taking it apart. You can see everything's pulling out absolutely perfect. It's flush. I'm gonna reassemble, and now we're gonna continue the rest of the way because I see no problem with this. Good to check. There we go, bearing removed. That is a crusty bearing. Could also be me too, but ready to go. This transmission case is now ready for cleaning. Time for the parts wash. Ready? Woo! Lordy, lordy. That was hot. I'm going to wait for this to come back down naturally to its room temperature before I rinse this. I don't want to shock this with cold water. This thing is really hot, but it is clean. I'm going to be replacing this seal right here. This did come with the rebuild kit. It is too small to use the seal removal tools like this, so I'm just going to be using a fork like this to pull the seal out. There we go. Clean this area out before installing the new one. Clean the old seal up to size it against the new one. Take a look here. Definitely from this perspective we could see the wear of the old one as opposed to the new one. Together a really quick seal installation tool, a bolt, a washer that just fits under the size of this hole, washer on the bottom, and a nut right here. Can be just like that. Make sure the seal is going to be straight before I tighten it down. I'll get everything together first. So I'm going to pull the slack out and get everything centered. A 13 on the bottom. Looks like we're done. I don't know if the green at the end is some sort of sealant like a Loctite or something, but it binds to the circumference here as it's pressed in. Either way, this is now done. It's seated. We'll move on to the next step. As I returned to the garage, it occurred to me that this all-encompassing motorcycle project, not just this transmission, the pendulum has finally swung from breaking down this motorcycle to finally building up this motorcycle. That is the restoration portion. There will be small sections of things that we've already disassembled that'll be broken down further, but I think the bulk of it has finally ended right here. I'm going to clean this neutral switch now, decontaminate it. Neutral switch is now all cleaned up. I'm going to test it before I put it in. It's interesting the wear pattern considering the thing sat in nylon. This is actually all clean. Put it off to the side. Next will be this, what they call the pole carrier. Going to clean this one up. Clean like new. I see some very, very light wear. Almost not worth discussing on the mating surface. This is just fine. Just a haze. Get another 40 years of service out of this thing. So we're going to lightly oil this piece. Now that I've seen this fit, assembly actually starts at the cam. We're going to clean the cam next so we could build this onto it. Cam is looking pretty nasty. We're going to clean that up now. Cleaned up real nice and decontaminated. I'm going to oil this lightly. Also check the shaft, make sure it's not loose. Fit seems nice, turns good. There's no play, doesn't bind. We're going to continue with this. Little worn here for the stops and the neutral switch, a little bit of wear, but nothing that alarms me. Next, I'm going to clean up the poles and spring. Poles are now cleaned up real nice. I'm going to actually put it in the sun a bit and heat it up a little, let the spring dry, and then I'm going to oil it. I'm going to clean these two spacers before I assemble the poles onto the pole carrier. Spacers are now cleaned and oiled. Oiled back up, the poles will now be situated back onto the pole carrier. Spacer on this side, looking at the pole carrier in this direction, we can see right here. With that, I drop the poles on like this one below and this one above. You can see that they don't bind. I take the other spacer and I place it on like that. Both are even. See from this side, both are even. I've cleaned these C-clips. I'm going to reuse them. There's no problem with them. They didn't cause me any concern. I'm going to pop these right back in, just like that. And there we go. Everything feels good. I will point out that these are not part of the rebuild kit from Jim's, these clips. If they were, obviously I would just grab new ones from the kit only because they were there. I'm going to set this cam now so we could see that these 3 teeth are pointed in this direction. We can all see the nub for the neutral switch is pointed this way. And I'm going to pull the spring, stretch it. So these are pointed outward and slide this right over the shaft, just like that, and then release it. It'll lock into place. Before I can assemble everything, I'm going to have to finish by cleaning this plunger here and its associated spring. We're going to do that. Cleaned and oiled. This is what locks it into the different positions. We're going to install this now. Nothing really to this. Just sort of stick it in like this. Spring back stops off the end, and this just kind of works like that. We're going to install the cam now. Couple things to remember. 1, I can't turn this upside down or it'll slide off. 2, this piece right here needs to sit between those springs in order for it to knock back to center. And 3, we have to keep in mind this that stays within those tracks. So putting it together, there are a couple challenges. We meet 50-50 here. Want to get it into that shaft and the center first. So it's in the shaft now. I could see just enough down here. We could see that it's in center. And then I'm going to have to use something as I lay it like this. I've got a metal pick right here. Just to get it low enough like that. And now we could see that this is seated. This is obviously seated. And this is between the springs, and I could actually feel that. It bumps in that direction. And I can feel it pulling back in this direction. It's between those springs, so we're good. So I've cleaned the thrust washer. I'm now gonna place it over just like that. Have the old C-clip. This is not reusable. And a new one does not come in the rebuild kit from Jim's. I have ordered one separately. Here's the new clip that I've ordered. I'm going to add in the neutral switch now. The threads are supposed to be coated with the PTFE pipe dope. I borrowed some from Jason. Let's screw this in now. I'll turn this over. We can see it's in the neutral position right now. This is going to be 5/8 torque to 120 inch-pounds. Having added oil to the new seal and the shaft, I'm now going to bring this shaft through to the new seal very carefully. I don't want to damage it. There we go. Let's place this back on just for now so I don't lose it. These mating surfaces have been cleaned and degreased. There is a gasket for this in the rebuild kit. This bolt will be placed in, so I don't forget. Now I'll reinsert this piece in between that slot and push up this portion into this hole here, keeping the gasket straight if we can. There we go. Reinsert our screws. I'm tightening these progressively to 120 inch-pounds. As we can see, this screw is now permanently stuck in here as it should be. I'm going to add on this linkage, if only temporarily, to test the shifting mechanism. I'm now going to shift between the gears right quick. We currently have it in neutral. First, second, third, and fourth. So I'm going to put the plug in just like that, set up the logo to be straight, and now I'm going to hit the center with a hammer to flatten it out and seal it into position. There we go, cover's plugged. This piece is now completed and will be stored with the rest of the finished transmission parts. So that's it for this episode. We covered the rebuild of the top shifter, the side cover kicker, the stripping down of the transmission case as a whole. In the next video, we're going to be focused on the rebuilding of the actual gears and the transmission proper as we get our main shaft and our fourth gear back from Ray for the custom work. When the next video is available, I will post a link up here. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button. It helps me a lot. If you haven't subscribed yet, do so. I hope you enjoyed this video, found it helpful and entertaining. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching. Would you like to reply?